All right, you're very welcome along to this Friday's Off the Ball. Neil Treacy here with you this evening. We are going to be looking ahead at the weekend's PRO14 Interpros. Munster and Leinster tomorrow evening down in Limerick. Ulster against Connacht is tonight in Belfast. We'll also have Pat Nevin on to chat through Liverpool's hammering of Leicester last night and the rest of the weekend's Premier League. Very busy time of year. And then Friday night racing from 8 o'clock. Davy Russell will be on to look back at the year that was for Irish racing. We are going to start, though, this evening with the weekend's Interpros and the PRO14, looking ahead to Munster against Leinster and to Ulster against Connacht tonight. All of our rugby coverage brought to you by Vodafone, team of us, everyone in. Rúaidhrí O'Connor of the Irish Independent is here with me this evening to look through. Rory, how are you? Nice Christmas?
Absolutely, Neil. All good, yeah. You?
Not too bad, no, not too bad. Good. Feed up over the last few days?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Eating a lot, drinking too much, and general merriment, but all happy enough to be taking a break from everything and talking about rugby for a little while.
So you're on like the player management system, just like the players themselves. There's a journalist management system for those who were out in Japan.
If you're on Instagram following all the players, you can realise kind of quite early this week that none of them were playing at the weekend. They're all off to
New
York and stuff. So I'm on a similar scheme at the moment. So yeah, getting through the season. It's a long season, 13 months in total. So you got to make sure you're fresh for the big ones, and plenty of big ones to come. 2020.
So you're not down in Limerick tomorrow night, but you'll be watching on TV.
It's slightly diminished, isn't it, by the teams? Like, it always is. And
it's a conversation we have every year, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're used to it now, and we expect it. In fairness, like the previous two games, Leinster, Ulster and Munster, Connacht, although they probably had a few better players in there, were both good games. So they will be good games because they're good players on display. But it's a shame that there's not less games across the season so that these games can get the priority they deserve. Players need a break, and we understand why they're not going to be there, but it's just a shame we're not seeing a full-blown kind of Irish trial at this time of year just before what's coming. But still interesting. Still a lot of players with some, with things to gain, things to prove down there. I mean, I think, say Shane Daly, for example, I think this could be a big Christmas for him. I think he's playing his way into serious reckoning for Munster. So, I mean, we saw Dan Levy 2 years ago kind of make his statement in this game. And Jordan Larmour 3 years ago, I think, or maybe it was 2 years ago as well. Maybe the same game when it went down. Levy was outstanding that day. Larmour scored that try. So, this is kind of where maybe the general public tune into some of the players that the kind of hardcore rugby fans have been raving about for a little while. Caelan Doris is starting in Thomond Park, so that could be a big one for him as well. He's in the wider Six Nations squad. So there is plenty of talking points and interest, and it will be, I think it's fairly evenly matched. I think the two provincial A teams played a couple of weeks ago and scored nearly 90 points between them. So if it's not like that, if it's not like Leinster, Ulster, certainly the 27,000 people won't be disappointed with what they get. It
is the argument you have every year about the standards of teams that, the biggest rivalry in Irish rugby is able to put out. It's not always there. Last year they were able to put out two very good teams, but there's a kind of catch-22 there, as you were saying, that it's a case, there's too many games. The players, they need to have a break at some point, and the reason these games are put on at Christmas is because you want to reduce the amount of travelling that the players themselves have to do rather than having to go over to Wales or Scotland this time of year. And unfortunately, this is the exact time where you have to play these games, but it's also really the only realistic part of the calendar where you can actually rest the big players as well.
Yeah, the season as it's structured is so flawed, so it just leaves these anomalies because, look, Munster are able to sell this out no matter what. It is a get-together for people every year. It's something that, it's a perfect time to get out of the house with a couple of people and go and watch a match, and it works. And as a, PRO14 and the RFU can look at it and go, well, it doesn't really matter who we put out. People will still buy tickets because they love going to this match. So there is that argument, but I think for the overall product and the product of the PRO14 in total, it definitely does take away from the status of the fixture. I think, but it works for everyone in the way that the players will be rested when it comes to Europe, and that's what's most important. In fairness, Munster and Leinster are not even in the same conference, so from a PRO14 perspective, it's not actually that big a game. It's those games between teams in the same conference that matter more. So Leinster Ulster was, Ulster scoring getting their 4-try bonus point last Friday was actually a bit of a blow for Leinster in there. It won't bother them really. They're so far ahead, but they're bigger games. So this is slightly diminished by the conference system as well, in that they're not actually going for points against each other. So like losing bonus points and things like that don't matter. So it's slightly, the season structure is probably undermining the fixture a little bit, but the fact that it's Munster-Leinster, the fact that it's the time of year will always guarantee the bums on seats, and generally guarantees a bit of bite and a good game as well.
I'll just run through the teams themselves actually while we were talking about them. They were named this afternoon. So Munster have made plenty of changes. Obviously, the vast majority of those Irish World Cup players have been rested this week. Joey Carbery is expected to feature at some point tomorrow. He's on the bench. He hasn't played since the World Cup with that ankle injury. But to run through the Munster team then, at full-back, Mike Haley, Dan Goggin and Shane Daly are going to be on the wing. Sammy Arnold and Rory Scannell in the centre, and JJ Hanner and Nick McCarthy, who's only played a few games for Munster so far, going up against his former province for the first time. And then the front row, Dave Kilcoyne is back at loosehead. Kevin O'Byrne and Stephen Archer complete the front row. Finian Wycherley and Billy Holland, who captains the team in the second row. Tommy O'Donnell, Chris Clute and Jack O'Donoghue make up a pretty strong back row for Munster. And then on the bench, a couple of good players to look out for as well there, like aside from Joey Carbery, but Diarmuid Barron, Jeremy Lockman is getting another game after coming back from his ankle injury there a couple of weeks back. Kenyon Knox, Darren O'Shea also there, Jack O'Sullivan, Neil Cronin and Calvin Nash complete the team then as well. Leinster, it's probably a bit of a mix of everything. They've just had so many internationals. It is a team that actually just has a handful of internationals in it. Hugo Keenan at fullback, Adam Byrne and James Lowe on the wings, Jimmy O'Brien and Conor O'Brien make up the centres, and then Gibson Park and Ross Byrne in the halfbacks. Ed Byrne, James Treacy and Andrew Porter in the front row. Devin Toner and Scott Fardy, a pretty strong second row pairing. Josh Murphy, Will Connors and Quaylan Doris in at number 8. And then the bench, Sean Cronin, Peter Dooley, Jack Ainger, making just his third appearance for the province. Ross Maloney and Scott Penny also there as well. Rowan Osborne, Kieran Frawley and Tommy O'Brien complete the 23 for Leinster. So like going through those, obviously there are a good few guys there that don't have a huge amount of first team rugby experience, but like guys this season from Munster, I'm looking at like Mike Haley, Rory Scannell, JJ Hanrahan, Dave Kilcoyne, obviously having him back is a huge boost as well. Billy Holland experience, and that back row, Tommy O'Donnell, Chris Clute and Jack O'Donoghue. Obviously you'd love to see Peter O'Mahony.
It's not a team of kids.
Yeah, you'd love to see Conor Murray out there, but yeah, as you say, it's not
It's
not
a
the
strong
academy.
Pro-14 team, mid Six Nations. You know, it's kind of it's all the kind of overseas signings who are available. Obviously, Arno Bota is suspended. With a smattering of young players, but they're not young. Like they're young players who are in around it. I mean, Shane Daly was 23rd or 24th man at all of Munster's European games this year. He's just waiting for someone to go, like Conway or Earls, to go down so he can get a run, and he was really, really good against Connacht. And as I say, I think he's playing his way in. So no, they're good teams, and like that Leinster pack is quite formidable. You know, it's like there's still internationals in nearly every position, despite the fact that they're missing all their World Cup panel members except for poor Andrew Porter, who played in all the World Cup games off the bench, but doesn't seem to get any sort of a break because he's just he's so durable, it seems, and you know. He's having a brilliant season. Him against Kilcoyne, they were two of the form players at the World Cup.
That's going to be great, actually.
A good battle. I'm interested to see what Knox. You know, I see a bit more of Keenan Knox, who's the South African teenager. They brought him over as a teenager. He's massive. He's very highly rated. He seems to have been tearing up trees in the All Ireland League. This season, he's starting to make his way through. Ainger on the other side was a kind of Ireland under-20 star who is kind of coming as well. So there's kind of a little bit of that kind of element of seeing how these players cope against the bigger fish, but there's enough experience there to give us a good game, and I think Leinster possibly have the edge in that pack, which could be the key down there. But then last year, the game went a bit wild. I mean, I'd say Joey Carbery's glad Johnny Sexton's nowhere to be seen because Sexton went.
It just became the story, didn't it?
It became the story, but it was like it started with Finian Wycherley going after Sexton. Then James Lowe got sent off. There was a couple of yellow cards as well. Sexton started kind of taking off in pursuit of Joey Carbery, and I suppose Leinster took a really good team down there last year, but I suppose the warning when you're predicting anything for these games is that they do sometimes take on a life of their own. The big crowd, like some of those players won't have played in front of 27,000 people before, so that will be a factor in trying to keep that Leinster team calm and not get too up for it and too carried away with it. So yeah, there's plenty to go at it with it. It's hard to read any form into it because it is such changed teams, and but they both went well during the World Cup, and these players were probably backboning the teams, so there's form there. They're both top of their conferences, I think, so they're both going well. And
like it's a good reward, obviously, as well for those guys who were the backbone of the team during the World Cup. Someone I might mention there as well. Actually, you briefly spoke about him. He was the centre point of one big flashpoint last year. Finian Wycherley.
Yeah.
He like only just turned 22 in December this year. I've just been seriously impressed with him over the last couple of years. He's absolutely enormous for a start. Versatile second row, back row, and there's just, I don't know, every time I see him play, there's almost, and I'm saying this in the nicest possible way. There's a real nastiness to him. I almost feel
like that's a compliment for a second row. I mean, that's your quintessential Munster second row. That's what you want. And I think Ty Burns' injury possibly opens up a bit of a slot for him. I mean, he was there in that Saracens game. He is edging closer to full involvement. But every time, you're right, every time I see him, I think, why isn't this guy starting? Why can't they get this guy into the team? Because he does give them just a bit more edge. He's a ball player as well. He's got a bit of everything, and he's still very young. So I think he's one now that he used his fixture to get him. Like I would say the Ireland players in that match all looked at the way he went after Sexton and went, we're impressed by it, and I would say the Ireland coaches, I think everyone was impressed by the fact that he wasn't to shirk off reputations. He was going after it, and that's what you want from a player of that age in that environment. He rose to the occasion.
He was only just gone 21, for this game last year.
That's exactly what you want to see. And we want to see more of that than tomorrow. And if he can do that, Byrne looks like he's going to be out for a couple of months, so there's definitely going to be openings there as the squad gets managed and all that sort of thing, and in these big games. And he looks like he has all the ingredients to go and be part of it, to add to what Munster have. And then he's one of these players who will be looking at the arrival of Snyman and going, well, I need to make my mark now before this guy comes over, because he will be one of the players who will be here this time next year. So,
what's the latest on those? It's
gone very quiet, but I mean, there's been nothing to disabuse of the notion that they're both on their way. But there's been nothing confirmed. It was fairly strong when it was reported first. Yeah. So I mean, it was, and
as Van Graan said, they were speaking.
Yeah,
confirmed that part.
But I mean, no one's asked about it for a long time. It's one of those stories that everyone just kind of.
We'll ask about it next time.
Yeah, we must do. Yeah, but no, it's like, as far as I know, it's all lined up and ready to go. But yeah, there's been nothing out of South Africa to suggest that they aren't coming. But the Alande's contracted in Japan until the summer, and I suppose South African rugby's basically been having a party since the World Cup. So maybe they've been putting everything on the long finger long term.
Joey Carberry's potential return tomorrow off the bench. It's been 2 months since the World Cup. Yeah. How bad was the ankle injury? Considering
I think we can
considering
he
has had to sit out 2 months since the World Cup, and how annoyed do you think Johan van Graan is at the thought that his marquee out half has had to miss 2 months of the season because he was played when he wasn't fit.
I would say Joey Carberry was complicit in the decision to push everything to try and go to a World Cup, and I think everyone you can only empathise with a young guy who's worked so hard to get there and sees his dream party being taken away from him. But it's quite clear now that Joey Carberry was not fit to go to that World Cup, that ankle injury and the surgery that came after put him on too long a time frame, that they rushed him back, that he never looked right in Japan. I mean, that when he came off the bench in Japan, it was almost like, we need this guy to come on and be the saviour. For some reason, Sexton wasn't involved. We never really got to the bottom of whether he was actually injured that week or whether they were trying to rest him up for later games. But he couldn't step the way he normally does. He didn't have the same freedom of movement. By the time he got to the All Blacks game, he looked okay. He actually did a couple of very good things in that All Blacks game, but he still wasn't at the best that we saw around this time last year when he was kind of running the show over in Gloucester. And I think for Joey Carberry's long-term well-being and for Ireland's long-term well-being and certainly Munster's long-term well-being, he shouldn't have gone to that World Cup. But it's easy for us to say that because Joe Schmidt needed him. Like Ross Byrne had a bit of a nightmare in Twickenham. I don't think Ross Byrne was very popular with Joe Schmidt. Anyway, I don't think he was very much he found himself frozen out a little bit in that setup. So it was always going to be Carberry and Carty backing up Sexton. But I suppose the plan was never to have Carty as number 2 and starting the Japan game. So it kind of there's kind of things going into it. But yeah, Carberry shouldn't have gone, and it's caused, like, this whole year, 2019 has been an absolute write-off for Joey Carberry. Yeah, he started it really well. That injury in the Scottish game in the Six Nations came back too early. Munster rushed him back a bit. They'd admit that themselves for that Edinburgh game. Limped out of that. Came back.
Hamstring,
came back for the Leinster game. I think towards the end wasn't at his best. Then comes back, looks really sharp against Italy for 30 minutes of that game. Then does his ankle. It's been what a waste of a year for such a good player. And the message, they've never said, we blame Ireland for this or that, but the message has always been very consistent, and there's a hidden meaning in it, I think. It's like, we need to get this player right. He is the future. We cannot rush him back. And I think the inference is that he has been rushed back too many times before.
Yeah, and they have had to be very, very patient with him since he arrived, because between picking up the few injuries here and there last season and international commitments and things like that, then leading into the World Cup and nowadays, I think is it 13 or 14 games he's played for Munster since they signed him 18 months ago. Like it, through no fault of their own or his own, there hasn't been much of a return yet.
No,
and the glimpses we've seen, there have been some fantastic. Like I remember the game against Gloucester last season in the Heineken Cup. He was absolutely outstanding over in Kingsholm. Last season against Leinster as well, he was brilliant as well. Like he has certainly shown you the reason they went out and got him.
I can't quite remember, is he still on this run of unmissed kicks? I think he was going through this incredible run. I'm not sure if it's still
12 months ago.
Yeah, that was coming into the Six Nations. That was the kind of run of form he was on.
I think
he got over that. Wasn't it the Exeter game when he got over that and then came back stronger. And whenever he's been in that red jersey, he's shown really well. He's been very, very good. He's looked a really good signing. But I suppose the one fear there is with Joey Carbery, and until he kind of gets this run of games, an unbroken year or two, without injury, there is a fear that he is a little bit injury prone or a little bit brittle. Because even with Leinster, he got injured quite frequently. I mean, that Fiji game with Ireland, for instance, it's often when he steps up to play for Ireland, and maybe it's the nature of the way Joe was looking for his tends to play right on the line. That's the way all
bringing it right up to contact.
But he does probably need to get a bit more durability into him. I mean, a bit more of that Owen Farrell toughness. And Sexton gets a lot of injuries, but he does pitch up and play a lot. Certainly for Ireland, Leinster probably have missed sometimes. But when it gets to the business end of the season, Johnny's generally there. But then he's a very young man. He's still kind of making that step up. But yeah, I would say Van Gran is. Well, I'd say he's pretty frustrated that he keeps going to Ireland and coming back injured. I think that's definitely going to be something that will frustrate them, and the World Cup one will definitely frustrate them. But I think they've probably given him enough time to strengthen around the ankle so that it's not an issue right now.
Do you think maybe they actually gave him a little bit more time than he needed this time around?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they've got covered. They got Hanner, like Blaindale going down is a bit of an issue because they had two good tens to look at to cover him. They have Scannell can nip in there as well when needed, so they have options. But I think when it gets to racing away, they really, really want to have Joey on the pitch. But at the same time, not rushing him straight back into the starting team has been a bit of a nod to the fact that JJ Hannahan's been very good.
Yeah.
And I think won't be handing that jersey back, easily. I think Carbery is probably the better footballer when everything's going well. But I think there's probably a challenge for Joey to go and prove that he can do it back to back, week on week. But Ireland probably need him at the Six Nations as well. So it's good news that he's back. Just here's hoping for a good unbroken run. Because when he gets that, the sky's the limit for him. Yeah,
I was going to ask on the Six Nations there as well, because if he gets 2-3 games under his belt decently now over the next 3-4 weeks, like do we know yet what the deal is with Johnny Sexton's injury? I was trying to look back on notes and stuff. From what I can see, there has just been Leinster were saying they don't have an update at this stage. It's pretty unclear.
Yeah, it's
at this moment in time.
It's in and around Six Nations time. So it's either right at the start. I don't think he'll play for Leinster between now and the Six Nations. The week before the Six Nations is down week anyway. They're going to Portugal. I think he's definitely targeting being back from there. I think there's some caution that he may not make it, but I think he's quite bullish about the fact that he'll make it. So I think that's all part of the captaincy plan. I think he will be Ireland captain, and he will be there for the first game, and he's doing everything he can, because otherwise that muddies the picture. I think Paul O'Connor wasn't able to captain Ireland in his first game. Jamie Heaslip captained against Samoa, and the following week O'Connell made his first because of an injury. So there's precedent there, but you kind of want, if you name a new captain, you want him to be there for the first match of the Six Nations, and they are very important games. So there's some fears that he may not make it, but he's pretty good record of pitching up when he needs to, just in time for Six Nations time. But Carbery is, if he can get fit, it has to be considered a proper rival to him, particularly given the age profile and looking 4 years hence. Now, I think it'll be a slow process, but at some stage, Joey Carbery, if he is going to be the man in 4 years' time, and I know people want to move away from World Cup cycles, but you do have to have some cognizance of what's coming. He needs to have time in that jersey. But if Sexton's going to be captain for the first year or two, it's going to be tough for him to get the jersey off him, but he needs to start playing well for Munster first. I think he was in that camp on just pre-Christmas camp to whatever it was, the stock take. Yeah. He'll be in. I mean, he's the second best out half in Ireland, certainly. But I think Byrne comes into the equation a bit more now as well. And if he's a good game on Saturday or tomorrow, he could force his way into the picture as well.
Ulster and Connacht kicking off shortly. Thoughts on this? Two strong teams actually out for this game.
Yeah.
Ulster having had to rest a lot of players last week, like Will Addison's there. Luke Marshall and Stuart McCluskey, their first choice centres. Louis Ludick, Billy Burns, John Cooney, Jack McGrath, Rob Herring, Marty Moore also back in there as well. And an Ulster win tonight, that puts them in a great position and takes probably a bit of league pressure off heading in towards the Claremont game in the Champions Cup.
Yeah, Ulster in a really good position, and Dan McFarland, I think, has been targeting this particular game for a long time, because early in his tenure last year, Ulster came up and beat them, and the fact that he's a former Connacht assistant coach who played for Connacht and was, you know, almost an ambassador for Connacht for 15 years, he loves the place, but also doesn't want to give bragging rights back to them. I think they got out scrummaged that day. They got absolutely minced in the scrum, over and over again on their home patch, and it was one of those moments at the start of his tenure where he realised that he had a long way to go. Now he's bridged a lot of the gaps that needed to be bridged over the course of the time he's been there. He's done an excellent job, and I think Connacht probably aren't as strong as they were in the early days of last season, and even the early days of this season. They're still a little bit light in certain areas, and I'd be slightly fearful of them going up to Ulster with just the fact that Jack McGrath's back. They pick Cooney, that he's named, apart from his World Cup player, he's named a very, very strong team. So I think, and did they go back to back last year, Connacht, on Ulster? I think they might have. So that's a bit of a wound. I mean, Connacht never beat Ulster for a long, long time, and I think that was a bit of a source of pride for Ulster for a long time. And I think putting Connacht back in their box a little bit will be the motivation tonight. And I kind of find it hard to see Connacht going up and getting a result up there.
One person I might mention as well, we're running out of time now, but Marty Moore, with John Ryan injured from a few weeks ago against Saracens, like Marty Moore, he was back in that stock take with Andy Farrell as well. He's someone who he just got by, I think, last year in his first season. I think he's been absolutely fantastic this year. Yeah. And even around the pitch as well, I think he looks fitter. His tackle count is getting higher and higher every week as well.
He was always a great breakdown threat as well. I mean, Marty Moore is an excellent player. I don't know, was he put in the bowl corner for going to Wasp for a couple of years, but he never got a look in after he came home. Now, injuries didn't help him, but he's certainly one of the top tight heads in the country. He's probably a more dynamic player than John Ryan or Stephen Archer down in Munster. You know, like he even though he doesn't look it at times, his ability to get over the ball, as you say, his tackle technique, his clear out stuff. He's a very, very good player. And I mean, for those 2014 and 2015 Six Nations titles, he was coming off the bench and affecting games all the time. He's got 2 medals there. I don't think he's played since 2015 for Ireland, because he went to Wasps, which is kind of mad. But he's still quite young, and I don't see why he wouldn't be brought back into the fold. I think he's still some way behind Andrew Porter and Tadhg Furlong. Yeah. But Furlong hasn't played particularly well since the World Cup, so he needs a bit of a kick up the backside. So he's probably an injury or two away from getting back into the kind of Ireland 23, and he's one to keep an eye on. As is McGrath. I was kind of surprised McGrath wasn't invited to the wider group either. I don't think Gareth O'Sullivan was there either. So
no, he wasn't.
They're 2 excellent loose heads, and I thought before he got injured, McGrath was starting to look like his old self. Which, if Ulster can get him back to top, to being the line that he was, that's some signing.
Mm-hmm. Finally, we're running out of time here now. Quick predictions for this weekend?
I think Ulster will win tonight. Just think Connacht are a little bit off it at the moment, and probably need a bit of a break, and I don't know where it's going to come from. I think Leinster can go down to Munster and win. I think they've just picked a slightly stronger team, and their overseas signings are slightly stronger. I think Lowe has something to prove after getting sent off there last year, but it'll be tight, and if the game takes on an element of madness, it's very hard to see which way it'll go. But I think Leinster could just edge it.
All right, Rory, thanks a million for coming in, and have a happy new year.
Cheers, you too.
All right, coming up next here on Off the Ball, Pat Nevin on the weekend's Premier League.